right, well, this morning the first thing I want to do is give a shout out to Benchmark Abrasives. I emailed them, I think it was last week, and asked them if I could get some sort of a discount or maybe wholesale pricing or something to help me with all the different abrasives that I go through. And they responded back right away, and they've given me a 10% discount, and then they sent me these goodies. So I'm gonna go ahead and unbox them and see what they sent. And if you guys if you guys want to use my 10% discount, use the coupon code TAC10 when you check out at benchmarkabrasives.com. They've got all kinds of things, from your regular old flapper disc for your 4.5 inch grinder to drill bits to hole saws to everything in between. So thank you, Benchmark Abrasives. Let's see what they sent me. Oh, cool. Looks like they sent me a t-shirt. Very cool. Density grind, density cut, grind, finish, mix pack. Ah, looks like some 40 grit flapper discs and some 80 grit flapper discs. Oh, and a couple of cutoff wheels, and then regular oh, these are the depressed cutoff wheels, the inset ones, and then some regular grinding stones, and then their regular cutoff wheels for the 4.5 inch grinder. Awesome. Get these all unboxed and hung up and put those in my stockpile. Anybody who's doing any kind of metal work knows that these flap discs, for sure, you go through them pretty fast. So awesome. Those. And then they sent me this, which I assume is a banner. Well, that's a nice banner too. Well, it's a big one. Sweet. I'll let this thing straighten out and I'll get it hung up here on the wall. Awesome. Thanks, Benchmark. Again, if you guys want to take advantage of that 10% coupon code, it's TAC10 at benchmarkabrasives.com. We'll get into the video now. All right, well, good morning. It's hard to know where I left off on the last video. I believe in the last video I was welding up the rear axle, and off camera at some point I stopped rolling film. I stopped using the GoPro and I just got her done. I was just working. Anyway, so I've got the upper link mounts welded on. I've got the unit bearing cups welded on. I've got the lower link mounts welded on, with the exception of the gussets. I've got gussets top and bottom that are just tacked in. I just wanted to put everything together real quick before I fully welded those out. And then obviously I got the rear backbone truss tacked in. I wanted to just leave everything tacked in as far as the backbone truss is concerned until I figure out my bump stop pads and then my sway bar radius arm link mount. I want it to land somewhere back here, so that means I'm probably going to have to put it somewhere in here on top of the truss, and I didn't know if the truss was going to interfere with it, if I was going to weld directly to the axle tube. I didn't know, so I just have the truss tacked in for now. But the other thing I still need to do is I'm going to gusset the backside of this upper link mount, so this will be plated in back here. Probably put my logo right here, so that'll be cool. That's going to be some time intensive, kind of tedious work, but definitely something that needs to be done. I just want to wait until I have the patience and I'm in the right frame of mind to do that sort of work, because it's going to be some trial and error with cardboard and drawing in the CAD program, etc. So and then obviously off camera I put the rear axle back in, got everything put back together, put the drive shaft in, links, trailing arms, shocks. So we're back to basically full roller status. My buddy Jason was over on, I think it was Tuesday, and him and I tackled the winch mount tubes. So we've got this cross tube in here, and then this little tube proved to be a little bit of a challenge. I tried to use the Dragon, and while the Dragon machine I got the angles on the bends right, the fact that these notches are so close to the bend, I couldn't use the Dragon machine to do the cope, so I still had to notch this by hand, and I just got my angles wrong. So we have version 1 here that was not going to work because these angles were too steep, but we got it right on version 2. So anyway, that's how things go sometimes. So that's the way that looks. Right in here there will be a plate of some sort that's going to support the fair lead, and then this is what I'm thinking the winch mount's going to look like. I had to look up the dimensions on the winch, and actually I can already tell you this is upside down. So this goes, plate's going to go something like that. So the holes are offset to one side because the motor on the one side of the winch is a little wider, and the winch it's a tight fit in here. The winch fits perfectly. It's like I built it around the winch, but the holes are offset because the motor side of the winch is a little bit wider, and the mount holes are going to have to shift to the right, or the driver's side if you're looking at it from the front of the car. So that's kind of what it's going to be like. I'm going to add a couple more cutouts right here, because this doesn't need to be fully welded all the way around. I don't want to put a ton of heat into it. Plus these little reliefs in here will allow water to drain. So there'll be a relief right here, and I believe I put a relief right there, and maybe, I don't know, I might put one right here too. So that's what we did off camera earlier this week. So I've got to weld all this stuff in. I don't know if I'm going to do that today, but I think what I'm going to focus on today is rear bump stop mounts and the rear sway bar. I really need to get this chassis on its own weight, because my little cart that I'm rolling this thing around on is really struggling. I never meant for this cart to hold that much weight and do what I'm doing with it. So it would be handy if I can get this thing on its own weight. We'll see how far we get today. It's going to be a challenge because the way these tubes are coming down right here on the chassis, and figuring out how to mount the bump can and the angle is going to be a challenge, but that's par for the course. That's how it all is. It's all a challenge. So if it was easy, everybody would do it, I guess. So anyway, that's what we're going to do. Here we go. All right, so you probably saw in the time lapse, I put my sway bar bushings in and then realized the sway bar tube is a little bit too long to have proper engagement on the sway bar link ends on this spline section here. So I need to trim this rear sway bar tube a little bit. I need to trim it down. It needs to be 44 and 5/8 if I did my math correctly, to get the engagement on those splines. And right now we're at 45 and a half. So I need to take a little off of each side, do the math there, whatever that is. It's a little over 3/4 of an inch, an eighth over 3/4 of an inch that I need to trim off of this. So I'm gonna set up my laser and make sure I trim an equal amount off of both ends. All right, well, I got the sway bar in. It was a little bit more challenging than I thought it should be. Those Delrin bushings are pretty tight on the sway bar itself, and so I had to fool with it a little bit, to say the least. But I got it in. This bar right here represents the arm, just kind of mocked up in place. I'm gonna have to fabricate my own arms, but I'm just trying to see where everything lands here. We have the rear axle at full bump, and this is our bump stop. So what I'm up against is I want to make sure the bump stop lands. I think my plan is to make sure it lands right directly on top of the axle. I'm gonna need to build a striker pad here, and the striker pad itself is gonna add a little bit of height. So this is gonna come up some. So the bottom of the axle, or the center line of the axle right now, and I need to measure everything and make sure my links and stuff are exactly the same length so that the axle isn't shifted one way or the other. But right now, if I land this thing on the front of the or right on the center of the axle, that would raise this up a little bit. I just need to make sure that I have access to this right here, because this is where you add nitrogen to pressurize the bump stop, and I don't want to get too close to this tube here. Then you can't get the cap off, you can't get the chuck to add the nitrogen. It's just like an air chuck. You add your, basically it's a Schrader valve. So anyway, so that's kind of what I'm brainstorming. I don't know right now. I can leave it about like that and still have access. I need to get some plate and put down here to represent the striker pad, and then if I can stay with this, it will work. However, the other option would be to kind of cantilever it off the front of the axle a little bit with the striker pad, and that would give me more room up here to access that Schrader valve and everything. But if I put it back this way, I can come in with some plate work right here and support the top of the can, and then run some tubes off of this tube here, and then a tube off of this tube here to support the bottom of the can. So I'm just kind of weighing out my options and trying to figure out what I want to do. The other thing is, and the reason why I wanted to get, see if this will stay right there without falling. The other thing is, and this is the reason why I wanted to manufacture or fabricate my own sway bar arms, is this arm is going to have to go inward a little bit, because I don't know if you remember in previous videos, at full articulation this tire comes up in here quite a bit, and I just want to make sure that the sway bar arm, and this represents the inside of the sway bar arm, the outside is going to be somewhere over here. but I just want to make sure the tire doesn't contact the sway bar arm. So I've got quite a few things to consider here, and that's why I waited until I got the sway bar. And I have kind of a design in mind for the arm. I just want to make sure that everything is going to be fit right. And the level of the arm doesn't really represent how it's going to be at full bump. It's going to be more like up here. So you can see that here. It's kind of going upward. It can't go too much further upward, otherwise it's going to contact these tubes up here. So anyway, that's what we're working on. That's what we're working with. So there's quite a bit of figuring to do here. And I think the first step is going to be to get something here that represents a bump pad, or the height of a bump pad. I'm figuring maybe a 1/2 inch at most. And then we'll go from there. All right, so I've designed a sway bar arm, and I've got it just in here, clamped in here. I may, like I said, I may have to take and bend it inward a little bit because of the tire thing, but I haven't tested anything in that regard since I've gotten the sway bar. So I went ahead and cut this sway bar arm design on the plasma table. This is just the outside structure of it, but it's good enough to flex out the chassis with the tire on and see if I'm going to need to use this for if I'm going to need to bend it inward for clearance. So I also have my brake my brake rotors, so I'm going to go ahead and throw a brake rotor on here, which is going to move the tire out by 1/4 inch. So it all comes down to fractions of an inch with all this stuff, packaging and making sure it fits right. So now I'm going to go ahead and put the tires back on real quick, put this thing up in the air, check and make sure my pinion angles are right, because that will affect where the angle of the bump stop landing, and flex it out and see what the tire does here. All right, here we go. All right, this is by far the furthest flexed out I've had this thing. It's pretty damn sketchy with the way I'm lifting it off the bottom of the trailing arm. But anyway, you can see what we're up against. You can see the tire and the sway bar arm. And if I rotate the sway bar arm upward a little bit, there, right there, it's hitting the tire. So what I need to know now is this distance from how far away from the axle is it, and if that sway bar length is going to be any longer. So I think stand by, but right now as I see it, I'm going to have to bend that arm in a little bit to clear the tire. And you know, this is, to be in this position probably will only happen once in a blue moon, but I want to make sure that I don't have any contact. All right, so what I've figured out is, as long as the sway bar link, which is the radius rod that goes from here down to the axle tube, is under 14 inches, ideally if it was say 13 and a half, 13, then I won't have to put a bend inward on this arm, which will make fabricating the arm that much better and that much easier. I actually could have probably bought a prefabbed arm, but I didn't know that, and you don't know what you're going to do or what you're going to have until you have all the parts. So I'm still going to take the bump stops and mount them inward a little bit more than I need to, just in case. But I think all my figuring is correct, and I've got that worked out. So the next step is to go ahead and pull the tires back off and start figuring out how to mount these bump cans. All right, so you can see, for packaging reasons, because that upright and the length and where things need to be, this tube being right sort of in the way of mounting the bump can on the center line of the axle, I decided to move the bump can or the bump stop forward of the axle by about a half.
So it's hanging off the front half of the axle, or it'll be striking on the front half of the axle. So I'll make a striker pad here. Right now I've got 2 tubes, left and right, and I want to do a third point of contact. I'm either going to do another tube that comes sort of in here and then just straight across, or some plate. I'm not sure yet what I want to do. I'm just inside of where the sway bar arm is, so hopefully my figuring is correct and there won't be any interference at articulation, I guess you call it. But that's kind of where we're at. I don't know. I might do some plate work in here, just to plate gussets that go kind of from here to here, and then maybe from here to here. I don't know. It might be not worth trying to do a tube, just because of how tight things are in there. That notch for this would be hard. It'd be a mofo because of this tube coming out and then this tube curving down, and so maybe I'll do a plate work gusset in there and just kind of see. I tacked this thing in and I forgot to turn the King logo in the right, or orient it in the right direction, but oh well. So yeah, that's a lot of progress for today. Honestly, it's almost 4 o'clock and it's hotter than hell today, so it's like 103 outside. Smart move right there. I insulated that garage door and the sun is beating on it, and it is a good 15 degrees cooler on that side of the door than it is on the other little garage door over there without the insulation. So something I should have done a long time ago. Anyway, yeah, I'll mess with some plate work in here, and I don't know. We'll see.